Today we're here talking to Captain Swish about hunting for fish.
Well, there's the old saying I always have, is habitat is where it's at. The fish are only there for one reason, and that's food. So you've got to understand that, like us, in winter, our habits of eating are different to what we are in summer. In other words, in summer we're barbecuing and we're eating salads, some people even eat, whereas in winter it's roasts and things like that. So our whole metabolism changes. So you need to understand that over a year, even month by month, things will change. So it's a matter of where are the fish going to be and what you need to engender them, because the moon phase plays a part in it, the tides and winds and all that. Believe it or not, chill factor in the wind. You can be as cold as and the fish will go off. So it's a matter of building up that knowledge and understanding of first where the fish are going to be. Then we're obviously looking at our sounder, and it's understanding what you're seeing. And unfortunately, the average person that doesn't get out on the water a lot doesn't get to know what they're actually looking at. So what we're going to be doing is explaining and showing you my screen on my sounder exactly what's going on. What type of bottom? We can tell that because if the bottom is narrow in its a yellowish area here, a transducer signal is absorbed by sand. So it'll be a thinner bottom. And then when you get big dashes of red underneath that, it's a hard structure. So there's a rock there or a rocky bottom, or it's going on to gravel and all that sort of thing. And that's where a food source will be. Where the kelp is, there'll be mussels, there'll be bait fish hanging around there, there'll be snails, there's all that good stuff. Whereas out on the sand, on clean, open, flat bottom, the food content out there is worms. Yes, there'll be still bait fish, there'll be crabs out there and shellfish out there. So the way and manner of which area you're fishing affects the way that the fish will feed themselves, whether aggressive, competing against the food as they do generally in the shallower kelpy water, or out on the sand where they're sitting there like Brown's cows munching away. So when we're looking at our sounder, you look at the depth, you can see what bottom type we've got, and we'll just generally talk about the bottom type itself. So from the top, first of all, a signal from a transducer goes down like an inverted ice cream cone, so it sends a signal out. My particular sounder, the Furuno TZ Touch, actually is designed so any fish that goes directly through the centre of the transducer beam, it actually shows the size of the fish, puts it on my chart plotter, which makes life really easy, but it is dead accurate. But like all other sounders, any fish that's out on the side lobes are just showing as marks. But what are those marks? No one in the world, or sounder, can actually tell you what those fish are. So if you interpret between the surface and the bottom, we've got a lot of little marks and then perhaps some big blobs there. We know that that'll be bait fish, mid-water bait fish. The bigger, redder marks, for example, will be more solid hits, which would be the kahawai or kingfish that are holding that bait fish together to feed on. And then when you look at the bottom, you'll see quite often, it fools a lot of people, is that there's just this big like red blob on the bottom, elongated or high or quite high. And what that is a massive fish that all together, because the sounder can't pick up all the fish individually, it just becomes, and the boat's moving, it just becomes one big blob of fish, and it's often overlooked as to what they are. And even snapper will come up and feed mid-water, chasing bait fish at certain times. So it's a matter of looking at your sounder and thinking about it a little bit more carefully, and looking at your chart plotter. So here we are here now, and this is what I'm seeing on the bottom. Where am I positioned on my chart plotter? So if I want to go back, I know when to turn around and have a look and re-find those fish, anchor up. Or another way of testing the water is by dropping a string of bait flies down like sabiki and drift through those fish and see what's being caught, and that will very quickly identify whether it's just bait fish or whether it's snapper, trevally, who knows.
So I can see here that we've seen a fish. Are we going to go back to find that fish?
Generally I don't look at one fish. What I want to do is, and it's a mistake a lot of people make, is that they'll see a few fish, drop the anchor straight away without even thinking about the wind direction, the tide direction, how the boat will lay and where those fish will be once the boat's actually anchored. What I tend to do is always travel into the wind, so I know by zigzagging around, especially on flat, sandy, open water, that there's fish there, there's a few more fish there, because on the open water they're grazing. So as you're picking up the fish, you know that, right, that's a pretty good area. So then I come back into the tide and the wind, so I can see where those fish are. So when I drop the anchor and the boat takes and lays back, we can fish back onto those fish.
Got you.
When we're in the kelp and the rocks and the likes of that, very important there that we have the boat laying so that we can cast directly out the back of the boat, so we can focus on the boat, on the baits, and the burley is going to run through the rocks and the kelp and attract the fish from a long way away, and gradually as time comes that they'll really come on and get quite aggressive. But while you're out there in deep water, hey, or even in shallow water, always put a bait line down, catch that fresh bait, always catches the biggest fish. Current's important, so you can see the shading difference, that's getting shallower. So where the dark blue line is, that's where the current will be pushing across, and look at the fish showing on the sounder now as a result of that. So there's a whole heap of bait fish and snapper and kingfish in amongst that lot, and it's largely due to the fact that it's like the side of a hill and the wind comes around and pushes it, and same thing is effectively the tide. And you can see we're on a sandy bottom with a little bit of gravelly rock down there, but not a lot. The other thing is, if you're finding few fish, you'll see a little blue dot there, and these little blue dots here, that's actually fish right hard on the bottom. So what you're seeing here on my right side of the screen, that's live, that's directly below the boat, and this is what we call history, this is behind the boat. So you can see there's quite a spread of little blue dots, so don't be dismissive. Yep, we've seen a whole bunch of fish before, but those fish are mid-water, lower water, so they will be moving, whereas these blue dots are fish hard down on the bottom. There's one that's just gone right through the centre of the transducer, but you see how we've got a clear bottom here, so that red, dark red, is showing we're on sand, and it's a soft bottom, so it absorbs the sand, but you can see all these dots here. Now you see that little yellowy type dot, that could be several fish together. So there is quite a reasonable amount of spread right across the bottom. So that's what you're looking for largely, is the little blue dots that are right hard down on the bottom. That's the snapper feeding.
So a side they feed it in?
Nah, I wouldn't. You get overcomplicated. That's all right to find those fish again, especially if you're game fishing and you're looking for schools of bait fish and the likes of that. But frankly, it's what's down on the bottom is what, to me, is important. There we go. Who's your daddy? Is that we know this is a flat sandy bottom because the sound is telling me that. If you can just see where the 49 is to the right of that, there's a little red mark. Well, that'll be a whole bunch of fish that are close together. So the sounder can't pick up all the individual fish, it's just picking up that big one that went right through the transducer, but that's quite a lot of fish sitting there. And up in the mid-water we've got a little bit of bait fish, not a lot. We've got a 39 feeding close down, and all this other blue marks, these are on the side lobes outside of the direct cone, so we know that there's a good spread of fish here. So as we ground bait and burley, that will go and attract a lot more fish back towards our area here. So what we're seeing is a whole bunch of fish. You see up here all that little light arky stuff, that'll be bait fish. There'll be kingfish all in here, and the snapper don't always feed on the bottom, they'll come up and feed the bait fish. Now you see it's solid red, that means that's a massive fish that are being held together, and all these fish are holding it together and they just chew in, so the snapper will come well off the bottom. See, there's a few snapper down here, see the arcs there? Well, these snapper come up and they feed mid-water. And the other thing is too, that when a school of squid's there, quite often, even in 20, 30 metres of water, we've had them virtually right on the surface.
So the surface
is this here,
yep.
And what you're seeing is disturbance up the top, and that's just aeration under the transducer. from the bottom, say where those fish are, down to here, it's quite a narrow band. So when a sounder is emitting its pulse, sand absorbs it, whereas if there were rock there, and we're going to go some rock shortly, it'll show you a tail that goes underneath here. So it's telling you it's rock structure. See all these little blue dots here? They're snapper. Furuno particularly, the way their colour setup is that snapper actually have pretty small swim bladders, but their coloration defines it better than anything else that I've found. So all that's there. So what I'm going to do is run out of fish here, and it'll be because the current on the edge here, so we're going to turn around and go back onto these fish here that are marked on my chart plotter. So the other thing I've got to consider is wind direction is blowing that way, and we're going to have an incoming tide which is that way, which is a bit of a pain. I like the boat and the wind and the tide all running in the same direction so you can fish directly off the back of the boat, but that's not going to happen, so you make the best of it. We're in 21 metres of water, so what we call the footprint of what's actually the size of the area on the bottom down there is reasonably large. When you get into shallow water, if you think of an ice cream cone that's inverted, so we're there in 20 odd metres of water, when you get there, the actual size of the footprint of what you actually see on the bottom is a lot less. And that's why we've just gone back directly over those fish and you've missed them. But they're in the area, we know that. Here we go, we're starting to find them again. Do you see again, here's the bit of rock there they're sitting on.
Awesome. We'll catch you next time with Bruce Duncan, Captain Swish.